Welcome to Sarpy Outlook. I'm Peg O'Dea Lippert. Our guest is Preston Love, Jr., author, activist, and most recently, instructor at UNO. Welcome, Preston.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Although I worked with your sister some 25 years ago, and during that time got acquainted with your mother, whom I loved, followed your dad's career in his later years, it's only in the last 8 to 10 years since you returned to Omaha that I've become acquainted with you through our mutual interest in political activism.
Yes.
And I know you have a long history of political activism, Preston. I thought today we'd start with the book, and that will lead us into the activism and ultimately to your instructing at UNO. I'm going to start with the terrible question for our interviewer by asking a double question.
Okay.
Would you tell us what inspired you to write the book, and what was that process like from the inspiration to publishing earlier this year, Preston?
Well, it's almost a flip-flop of your concept. It was not that I decided to write a book. It was more that I have lived the book for nearly 35 years of public service in one way or another, activism, if you will. And my book is just me regurgitating those 35 years in a way that I would probably summarize and say that I am 73 years old now. I have been working in the very serious part of politics and community activism for over 40 years. And my book is a capsulization of my wisdom. And my wisdom is focused on the urban challenges that we have as it relates to community engagement. Voting is a big part of that community engagement scenario. So my book was more of a natural evolution of just what I have become. I never sat down one day and said, I'm going to write a book, and then picked up my pen. I more or less began to write articles, which accumulated into this book. Putting a book together is a whole another kind of challenge. I'm now, after having written it and putting it out there, launched it, if you will, very sorry that I haven't written more books. I have so much more to say, and I hope that I have the energy and the patience and the discipline to write some additional books. I have a very unique history. When I was a child, you spoke of my dad and my mom. I would come home from school, and my brothers and sisters would, and Gladys Knight would be playing cards with my mother. And Smokey Robinson would be taking a shower in my bedroom. But so I have been, and when I was a child, I used to hang around with Count Basie when he went to the grocery store. I mean, I have had the unique experience of, in my entire life, with celebrities and historical figures all the way through my life. This book only taps into a very small piece of that fabric. And so I don't know. What I'm saying to you is I'm probably going to be writing some more books, but they're going to be more difficult. This one was really easy.
I think what you're saying, Preston, is that the book wrote itself.
Yes,
you just happened to get it published.
That is absolutely
Would you
right.
show us the book?
Sure, my pleasure.
And Charlene can probably post this.
But the book is called Economic Cataracts, which is a provocative title. We surely could talk about it with the time that we have left. But it's a chronicle of the activities of mine and others as it relates to trying to get community engagement in our community and all of the problems therein.
Based on what you said about your growing up experience, Preston, what would you identify, if there was one moment, your first political activity?
My first political activity I probably talked about 2 times in my whole life. A very interesting one. I lived in, worked for IBM and worked in Des Moines, Iowa. And I met a fellow by the name of Harold Hughes.
Governor, former governor.
That is correct. Very few people
I know.
that.
I was working at Iowa
And
at
he
that
was
time.
the most dynamic person that I've ever met. He was a former alcoholic, a former truck driver, and the most dynamic, big, giant personality. And he asked me, only because I was a little young whippersnapper and looked good in my 3-piece blue suit, to travel with him as he went around to think about running for the presidency of the United States. And I think I got tapped right there, and I never forgot that experience. Turned out he decided not to run, and I went on about my 14 years of IBM, never thinking about politics again. But that,
Interesting.
yeah, very.
What year would have that been in?
That was in 1964?
70. Oh, 70.
Yes.
Wait, okay. Interesting.
It really is. It's a great story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get picked up again until many stories later and many activities that gets picked up in Atlanta, Georgia in 1980.
And I
10 years later.
understand that you were a personal acquaintance with Julian Bond, whom we only admired from a distance.
Yes.
Is that was?
Oh,
you wanna
Julian
talk about
Bond.
that?
Well, I left IBM because I had the audacity to leave one of the best paying jobs for an African American at that time in the 60s, and I left it to start my own retail computer store. I started the first retail computer store in the state of Georgia. I sold the first Apple in Atlanta.
Amazing.
In ever. But my business was a little pioneering, too much, and I didn't have the money to ride the wave. And I lost my business. And so what I was, if you will, is I was one of the most intelligent, educated, experienced, unemployed person you've ever seen. And so while being unemployed, and I'll shorten this up, but someone suggested that I do some volunteer myself to drive Andrew Young, who was then running for the mayorship of Atlanta. But I've jumped
No,
the gun
that's
a
fine.
little
It's a
bit.
great story.
Oh, there's some great stories within. But I do say that while in Atlanta, I met and was embraced into a very close-knit family called the Civil Rights family in Atlanta, Georgia. You don't elect to get in it, and they don't really have an election to get you in it. You just don't get in it. It's all made up of the Kings, the Abernathys, the Lowrys, the Youngs, and many other long-term civil rights families who learn to trust themselves only, bring no one else into the fold. I had the unique experience of being brought into the fold quickly while I was in Atlanta, and primarily was because of my relationship with Ambassador Andrew Young, who was, as you know, not only King's entourage, but he then went on to be congressman. He then, when Jimmy Carter was elected president, he was the ambassador to the UN. He then came back. He was fired for another good program for talking to the PLO. He then came back and decided to run for the mayor of Atlanta, and I became his driver. And as a result of becoming his driver, I end up being one of the 3 people that he appointed to significant responsibility. I was the commissioner of planning for the city of Atlanta.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, the driver was. And but it was a result of a relationship that I built, him realizing my unique capabilities, and it was just one more chapter in my very unique life, because I became very close to, finally to your question, to not only Julian Bond, but John Lewis and the King family and all of that. It was just, I became one of them and have so many historical stories. But the other part of that story is that all of the icons in the civil rights movement and in the voting rights movement, I became very close to. Julian Bond was a dear friend of mine, and of course he recently passed. I wrote a story on my relationship with Julian Bond. I won't try to tell that whole story, but it has to do with the fact that when he ran for Congress, he ran against John Lewis, of all people.
Yes.
And they were great friends, and I was great friends with both of them. And I supported a third party. Not a party, as in Democratic Party. I supported a young black woman called Jan Douglas. I felt and I had just finished my experience running Jesse Jackson's campaign, and they were all vying for my great expertise. And so my dear friend John Lewis and my dear friend Julian Bond were vying, and I chose another person. They were very unhappy with me. She was brilliant, a brilliant woman, much like Barbara Jordan.
Oh, wonderful.
But she couldn't deal with the celebrity of John Lewis and Julian Bond. John, when there was a primary, then it was John only, and Julian, I went with Julian, helped him. And then, of course, my expertise was extraordinary, and Julian lost. And John Lewis was elected, and quite frankly, that seat that he sits in right today is that same seat. He's been in it ever since that time. Julian and I became very close friends over the years.
He forgave you for his loss.
He did forgive me, but I wasn't sure. I ran into him a couple of times, and I thought the first thing out of his mouth was going to be, "Preston, why did you?" But so yes, I knew Julian. I know John.
Well, so you knew all the people firsthand that we just watched on TV and admired from a distance. What a remarkable experience.
Yes, it was
Preston.
remarkable. Yeah, and none of that is captured in my book.
So many books yet to come.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about the shift now from all of that, and as you said, that predated the book certainly, and to your now being an instructor at UNO.
Well, my instructorship, my adjunct professorship at UNO is much like my book. It's just an evolution. I have so much experience. I've run a presidential campaign. I've been involved in all sorts of things. I'm an activist right today. Is that I have so much to offer that when I presented myself to the UNO staffs, they attacked me because there are many PhDs who have excellent knowledge in these matters, but very few
have
firsthand. And so it is a wonderful experience. I'm just starting. I have a great class. My class is made up of one lady from Togo, another from Somalia, another
from Council Bluffs.
Yeah, one from Council Bluffs. But I mean, I have a very diverse class, and we're talking about the evolution of what I call black politics. It actually was colored politics and Negro politics. But and so I'm enjoying teaching them, and I think they're really enjoying learning because they are learning from someone that really has been there. Yeah.
Well, tell us just a little bit, and we could go on all day, obviously, but tell us a little bit about, since you returned to Omaha, and your political activism and community activism here in Omaha, and the get out to vote, the voter registration, all of those things that are still current and important issues.
Well, first of all, I came back home in 2006 after traveling all over doing what I was doing. I came home because my dad had passed, my mother had Alzheimer's, and I just wanted to be home. I came home to be inactive. I had, in effect, retired. And yet my health is good, my mental health is good, my physical health was good, so I've been blessed. But what I found, Peggy, demoralized me, and that is I found my North Omaha community in shambles. Poverty-stricken, lack of what I consider to be cohesive leadership. The key word there is cohesive. Splintered activism, and quite frankly, naivete as it relates to someone that maybe has been around for a while and seen. I have a thing that I will reveal to you on this program, never before heard in the annals of the world, is that I think that we should pass a law that anybody living in North Omaha should have to travel one time every couple of years in order to see what the rest of the world is doing, because it is so myopic here.
Preston, I think anyone who wants to run for office should be required to have experienced something beyond their own neighborhood.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean,
See how
really,
the
I'm doing it with tongue in cheek, but I'm very.
No, I'm
but
serious.
the short
too.
version of the answer to your question is that because of that, I immediately became very active in every way. And even in 2006, when I moved back, I was involved in helping some people get elected. I started right off trying to get turnout in my community, and I've been doing it ever since. And that's kind of the short version, but it's something that is my full-time activism is about getting my people to turn out. My book deals with why a poverty-stricken community does not vote, why they're not community engaged. That's really what my book focuses on,
Preston.
and it centers around poverty.
You know, we could, as I mentioned earlier, talk all day and very interested in your stories and your experiences. But in concluding, what parting word would you have for our viewers?
Well, my parting words, I hate for it to be parting.
Well, that sounded a little final, doesn't it?
But it is, I hate to use someone else's, but you may or may not know that I researched, wrote, and I performed a one-man performance where I become Adam Clayton Powell, who is one of my great idols. And his mantra was keep the faith. And my parting words would be, there's so many troubles in so many arenas, so many challenges that affect us directly, indirectly. My mantra, my parting words would be keep the faith, keep active, don't give up. We can make changes if we just stick together and get busy.
Thank you so much, Preston, for your time. And on behalf of the Sarpy County Democrats, wish you the best of success with your book and books yet to come.
Thank you.
And together we can make a difference.
Yes, we can.